Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blue, we'll cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, this week one matchup is big for a number of different reasons. I've explained that throughout the course of this week, but there was a topic that I kept hinting at we were going to talk about more later on in the week. And that topic is the perception of this team outside of our incubator, outside of our bubble that we've created, right? We've created this ecosystem. I don't want to say it's groupthink because everyone has their own mind. Everybody can think for themselves on how they feel about this team going into the upcoming 2025 season. But we all feel like this team has the potential to do big things. It's amazing how the narrative has shifted various times throughout the offseason, into the preseason, and now heading into the regular season. For the Commanders, it's been, oh my God, it's Jayden Daniels. What a fun, exciting team. They're going to be really good. Then there's a but. And I always tell you, if there is a conjunction, usually every word in that next sentence is some form of disrespect. And for us, it's, man, the Commanders had a magical 2024 season, and they're really good, but we don't think they can duplicate what they did last year. They're going to take a step back. And I kept thinking to myself that, yeah, that's a narrative that maybe a few people have, but I think most people understand the power of Jayden Daniels, the upgrades that the team has made this offseason, and what they can ultimately be. But what I've seen from a lot of the national media, and again, that's their prerogative. They can say what they want, but a lot of people don't think this team is going to make it back to the postseason, let alone be good. And I don't think we're going to even make it to the playoffs. And I've said it's this us against the world mentality. It's us against everybody because all we got is us. And I've been looking at a number of different, regular season polls to see where we are to start off the season. And I think there were 8 major publications like ESPN, Bleacher Report, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports, Sports Illustrated, all polled. There were 8 of them. And the Commanders were at the highest 6th, 4 times. They were 6th. And then the lowest they were was 11th, and that was on ESPN. You average up those preseason, we'll call them, regular season, start of the season, power rankings, and the average was 7th. We were the 7th best team going into week 1, which is cool. That's probably right where we should be, right around 6 or 7. And somehow, and this is no different than college football when it first starts and a team's ranked 7th in the nation, and by the time we get to the 5th week of the season, that team is no longer ranked in the top 25. A great example was Florida State last year. They were ranked really high. By the time we got to like the 4th or 5th game of the season, they were no longer in the top 25, and they ended up having an abysmal season last year, right? It can happen, but there's no way I'm going to allow someone to look me in my eyes and tell me that this team isn't one of the best 14 teams in the NFL and one of the best 7 teams in the NFC. I'm just not going to stand for it. I'm not trying to hear that. Not with 5 healthy and upright. And with the moves that have been made, and so many people want to connect us to the Houston Texans, and I keep telling people, Jayden Daniels is better than C.J. Stroud. They keep looking for this sophomore slump. It ain't coming. It ain't happening because this ain't C.J. Stroud. I'm taking a step forward. You're looking for a Texans-sized step back this year. And again, the Texans made it back to the playoffs, won their division, and won a playoff game just like they did in CJ Stroud's first year. But the people that push back against that notion say they played in one of the worst divisions in football. Had they not played in a terrible division, they would not have made it to the playoffs because they would not have been a wild card, and they would have missed the postseason based on the way that that team played last year. I don't have any pushback to that. And when you look at our situation, you play in a division with the Super Bowl defending champions. We'll see what the Cowboys end up being this year. And the Giants aren't going to be a pushover. This is not the AFC South. That's going to be the rebuttal to anyone that says, hey, we're not the Houston Texans. They're going to say, well, you're going to have to prove it to us. We're ready for the challenge. As a fan, I'm definitely ready for the challenge. Because I know this team is well coached. I know this team is more talented than they were a year ago. Yeah, I know the schedule is tougher. And yes, I know you can't rely on 87% fourth down conversion rate. And yes, I know you can't rely on going 9-3 in one-score games. I'm fully aware of the ball bouncing our way. And I'm fully aware that some of the things that we had the privilege of taking advantage of, i.e. playing against a number of backup quarterbacks. These are all things that I talked about throughout the course of this offseason. Things that we couldn't rely on. I've done videos on this. You don't think I'm aware of all of these things? But you know what people aren't giving us credit for or aren't even considering or taking into consideration is that what if we just get better at certain things to offset the fact that we don't need to be relying on 87% fourth down conversion rate? How about we just be better on first and second down, setting up more manageable third down situations that we can convert? What about converting first downs on first downs on second down? That'll keep us out of fourth down situations as well. You ever thought about that? What if this team generates more than the 17 turnovers they generated a season ago, which put them 15th in the NFL? What if we have a better turnover ratio or margin than +1, which is what we sported a year ago? What if the run defense isn't absolutely horrid and not one of the worst in the league, 31st overall? What if they're actually good at stopping the run? You ever think about those things that would make this team infinitely better? What if this defense isn't a sieve at the end of football games, allowing other teams to score and put the offense in a position where they have to try to go 9-3 in one-score ball games? These are all things that could transpire that helps this team be better against a better schedule. Yeah, a lot of things that happened last year, you can't count on a Hail Mary to win a game. We should have dominated that game. What if the Commanders don't have penalties that erase points off the board like they did against the Giants, like they did against the Bears? There are so many what ifs. There are so many things they can be better at, that they can improve upon from last season, that can offset some of the things that went their way last year. There's a lot of things that people aren't taking into consideration that I'm just not willing to overlook, to just fall into the lazy narrative of, oh, you're going to be the Houston Texans of 2025. You're going to take a step back. Not buying it. This team right here is capable of winning it all. They have a chance to be that good. And we're going to see them on Sunday for the first time in 2025, and it may surprise some people, I think. I'm anxious to see what it looks like. It's a really good test. I don't think people understand that the Giants are vastly improved. From a mental standpoint, they're going to be locked in and engaged. They're talented up front. They got some talent on the back end. Malik Neighbors is one of the most talented wide receivers in the entire league, let alone the division. Tyrone Tracy's a good running back. They've got a plethora of tight ends. And Russell Wilson, say what you want, and at this point of his career, I am not the biggest Russell Wilson fan. He can still manage the hell out of a football game. This is going to be a big challenge for the Commanders coming out of the gates. NFC East, a rival opponent that always plays us tough. I don't expect this to be a walk in the park. That's not how my brain is set up. I would love for me to be going into this game thinking just like I did, and it was a mistake, by the way, about 3 years ago, going into that 2022 season, when I said, man, if we don't dog walk the Arizona Cardinals, I'm going to be upset. And you know what we did? We barely squeaked out a victory against the Arizona Cardinals in week 1 back in 2022. I know better. I know how this goes. I just want to win. I just want to start the process of proving people who had the lazy narrative of, oh, this team's going to have a step back season. I want to start the process of proving them wrong. And that starts on Sunday at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time at Northwest Stadium against the New York Giants. This team has everything it needs to go out and be dynamic on offense, good enough on defense. Special teams remains to be seen. That's something that we're going to have to keep our fingers crossed with, especially the field goal kicking aspect. But ultimately, this team has everything they need to be successful. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in this game, but ultimately what happens this season. Whatever that looks like, the journey starts on Sunday. And I'm looking forward to proving a lot of people wrong who think this team's going to take a step back in 2025. And that is a real narrative that is out there circulating that I think is a false narrative. We'll see. In other news, we heard from DQ and his final press conference of the week, kind of setting the tone for what's to come on Sunday. We'll get to that. But before we do that, injury reports, the final injury report for both teams heading into Sunday's contest. Let's take a look and see what we have. We start with the good guys. And there is nothing here to see. DQ at his press conference said that Noah Brown and Jonathan Jones both had vet rest days. Neither were hampered by anything other than the fact that the team just wanted to be precautious and they wanted to give them a day off. And so everyone else that had been on the injury report, Dorrance Armstrong, Matt Gay, and Marcus Mariota, all full participants on Friday. There are no injury concerns for any Commanders. I told you all week long this was a very non-threatening injury report. I just didn't like seeing as many names on it, but ultimately our injury report, which had 5 names on it this week, is less threatening than the Giants injury report that only had 1 name on it, and that one guy may not play. Doesn't feel like he's going to play. We'll get to that in a second. So DQ said there are no issues with any players. Everyone's full go. All 53 players are available for Sunday's contest. And so you can't ask for it to be any better than that. So that's going to do it for the good guys. Now you go to the Giants, and this one is pretty self-explanatory, right? You've got Malik Neighbors with a back issue. He's been dealing with that all summer, but by all accounts, he should be just fine to go on Sunday. They just kept him out of practice on Friday. No big deal there. He's going to play. And we'll see if he's able to be as effective as he was the first time we saw Malik Neighbors last year. Hopefully, he is not as effective as he was in that game because we had no answers for Malik Neighbors last year in week number 2. Andrew Thomas is the big one. He was the guy that had been on the injury report by himself all week long for the Giants. We had conversations about him potentially being out of this game. I told you guys I was going to treat him as someone who was going to play until he doesn't, right? The word out on the street is he's probably going to miss this game. It is not 100% certain that he won't play, but it feels more and more like he won't play, right? Increasingly, the conversation has been Andrew Thomas is going to miss week 1, potentially be back for week 2 against the Cowboys. We'll see what ultimately happens. It feels like he's going to be out of this game. And if he is, that's a big blow to them. Obviously, they already don't have a great offensive line as is. Andrew Thomas is their best offensive lineman by a long shot. If he can't play, that gives us an advantage in this game, and we have to take advantage of that. So, feels like he's going to be out. Advantage Commanders, if that is in fact the case, we'll take it. We'll take it without question. We will take any and every bit of help that we can get. Not that we need it, but not turning it away either, right? So, still keep an eye on that because he's doubtful. He's not out. He's doubtful. There still could be a chance. Gets to the stadium, they work him out, and he gives it a go. I'm going to assume at this point that he is going to be out. But again, I've said this. You know what? I'm scratch that. I've said this already, and I'm going to stick with this until he's actually out. I'm going to assume he's going to play, but it feels like he's not going to participate in this game. That said, we heard from DQ on his Friday presser. Here's what he started with: captains. And I know this is not everyone's favorite thing. These floating captains, the weekly captains that they have. DQ loves it. I know that's not everyone's favorite thing. I don't really care. Doesn't make me one bit of difference. I actually think it's pretty cool when certain guys get the honor of being a captain. You know, certain weeks it makes sense. It motivates guys, maybe, whatever the case may be. But the captains for this game, there were obvious ones. On offense, Jaden Daniels. On defense, Bobby Wagner. On special teams, Jeremy Reeves. Those are 3 of the biggest captains on the team. And if you're going to go out in week 1 and have captains, you put your best foot forward. It makes a ton of sense. DQ also started off the press conference by essentially saying that everyone is available for this game in week number 1. So that's great news. You know, we didn't know about Noah Brown and we didn't know about Jonathan Jones. Those were a couple of guys that had been limited during the course of the week. So you really wanted to make sure that those guys were okay. And it was really good to know that, you know, DQ came out and said those guys are going to be fine. He was asked about Jalen Lane, and he said the thing he loves about Jalen Lane is that he applies the lessons that he's learned through practice and reps onto the field. He said a lot of guys, they rep things in practice, but then they get into a game situation and they forget about all of the training. And they go back to the bad habits, or they go back to the way that they are accustomed to doing something instead of the thing that they've been repping. And he said he's one of those guys, and they always go back to the fact that he's a coach's son because he's a guy that is a quick study. He, you know, you tell him something once and he's got it. They love that about him. And he also loves him on, you know, punt returns, and he thinks he's going to be a tremendous asset for this team in that regard. He was asked about unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, and has he emphasized that with the team, and then kind of the rules overall. And DQ said, yeah, that's one of the things they do on Fridays is they go over, you know, the rules. They go over different things that may have cropped up. Obviously, there was a game on Thursday with the Cowboys and the Eagles. There were a couple of unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Obviously, the biggest one that had everyone talking was the Jalen Carter incident where he spit on Dak Prescott, or he spat on Dak Prescott and was ejected from the game. Nolan Smith had a taunting penalty where he got up and, you know, got in the face of a running back after making a great play for a tackle for loss. And so those are things you want to avoid if you're a team like the Washington Commanders. We're going to talk about, you know, the importance of avoiding some of those kind of mistakes. That's something that hindered us the first time we played the Giants last year. So he said they went over those things. They had a bunch of cut-ups of some things from last year, some rule emphasis that, you know, the committee put together this offseason some things that the officials will be looking for. They want to make sure that the players are well aware of those things. So again, I've always admired DQ's ability to have this team over prepared. And that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed with this team is that it seems like no matter what the situation is, they're over prepared for it and they're ready when that situation hits. So, that's why it was so surprising in the NFC Championship game when we had some of the penalties that we had, because I remember telling you guys, I'm like, I don't think we had a late hit out of bounds, unnecessary, roughness type penalty all season long. Like, I couldn't think of one. So when you see one of those be administered to Mikey Sainristil, you're like, bro, what the hell? Like, we don't do those type of things. So I really think this team is going to be prepared from that standpoint. We don't beat ourselves in that manner. It doesn't feel like not from after the play, personal foul, unnecessary roughness, or after the play, unsportsmanlike conduct like that. That's not the type of shit that we get into, right? We might hurt ourselves with an illegal man downfield. We may hurt ourselves, with a block in the back or some bullshit like that, but nothing of the unsportsmanlike conduct, variety. He talked about the Giants' strengths, and he talked about their D-line and their receivers in particular. Really, he tried to talk about them having all different types of receivers, sizes, etc. He's just really talking about Malik Neighbors. I also, Wan'Dale Robinson is probably why he's talking about different sizes of receivers as well. Not that Darius Slayton can't hurt you. There's been times where Darius Slayton has kicked our ass, but it's really about Malik Neighbors, and it's really about Wan'Dale Robinson. Robinson has had some really good games against us, and Malik Neighbors had a really good game last year against us. So those are the two that stick out like a sore thumb. And then he talked about the D-line. Obviously, what they pose up front is going to be an interesting, challenge for this team in week one with an offensive line that hasn't had a ton of reps together. Going to be a really, really fun test. And obviously, those guys can get it going off the edge. They've got a guy in Thibodeau who could play with some power. You got a couple of speed rushers in Burns and Carter. And then you got one of the best interior defensive linemen in all the league, Dexter Lawrence. And so we know what that's going to be. They also have guys coming off the bench that provide depth. They're going to be a very formidable match for this Commanders offensive line right out of the gate. And so DQ talked about that. DQ was asked about this secondary and was this Giants game last year from week 2 part of the reason why they, revamped the secondary the way that they did. And he was like, yeah, the week 2 game sucked, but you know what else sucked? Week 1. It's always funny because when I have Candy Waller on, we always talk about how pissed off DQ and AP were last year, week 1 against Tampa Bay. And I told you I've never seen him more pissed off as a Commanders head coach than after the week 1 contest. He was visibly upset about how they performed in that game. They did not expect to walk into Tampa and get their brains bashed in the way that they did. And, there were other games where you could tell he was frustrated by the result. He was pretty pissed after the Dallas game. Probably more disappointed than anything else after the Eagles loss. But he was like that. He said we were pretty bad in week 1, right, against the pass. And so he hasn't let that week 1 game against Tampa Bay go. But, yeah, the Giants game didn't help matters either last year in week 2. This was a great question by Ben Standing. He asked about Tom Brady. First of all, how about that? The New York Giants have no business getting the Fox #1 team in week 1. But again, this is one of those situations where we drag some other team's carcass along to give them some national spotlight that they don't really deserve, i.e. Seattle later on in the season on a Sunday night. Like, what are the Seahawks doing in this spot? Jaden Daniels is the reason they're in that spot. Same thing can be said for week 1. You're getting the Fox A team of Tom Brady, Kevin Burkhardt, and Aaron Andrews. Like, what are they doing in Washington with a Giants Commanders matchup? That's crazy to me. I was like, you have nowhere else you can be? I was like, You don't want to be in Green Bay for Detroit, Green Bay. And I'm like, oh, it has to be a CBS game. Of course it is. Because I'm like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here for that. That's the equivalent of them showing up for Raiders Commanders. What are you doing here? But that's the Jaden Daniels effect, folks. That's the Jaden Daniels effect, right? And there are no other really good games in, that Fox is hosting because all the good games are already gone, i.e. Dallas, Philadelphia, you know, Bears, Vikings, like anything else that they could have had gone, right? Those are two prime timers. The best NFC game of the week, Packers Lions, is on CBS. But I digress. I only bring it up because Ben Standing asked DQ, like, Tom Brady is a part owner of the Raiders. You play the Raiders in a couple of weeks. There's sort of a conflict of interest there. Are you gonna have to, be careful what you say to him? Like, the league already kind of, wanted to investigate, like, should we take him off or should we say, hey, you got to choose between one of the two? And then they ultimately say, oh, he's fine. He's Tom Brady. We'll let him do it, right? He can be an owner and be a broadcaster because, as you know, these broadcasters sit down with both teams before the game. They're at practice a lot of times, and they sit down with the coach, and they sit down with the quarterback, and they sit down with coordinators, and they sit down with one or two players outside of the coach, coordinators, and the head quarterback. And so you get a lot of insight. And DQ was like, I mean, that's an interesting point that you bring up. But he's like, they got a job to do, obviously. And, a lot of times when you sit down with guys, it's game specific. So you're not going to be telling them, things that you're going to do all season. You're just talking about some of the things that you may do in this particular game. And they're going to ask you certain questions. You answer those questions. But, in the back of your mind, you got to also keep in mind, he's the ops. Tom Brady is now the ops because, again, you only play the Raiders once every, 3-4 years, but still, it is an interesting dilemma, I will say. And thought it was a really good question by Ben Standing, one that forced DQ to have to think a bit. He talked about dealing with intensity, right? Like there was a ton of intensity on Thursday night between the Eagles and the Cowboys. We saw that spill over into multiple scrums, penalties, galore in that game. Obviously we had the Jalen Carter situation. You had the Louie foul, situation where his helmet was knocked off and then he had his hand, on the face mask of Cooper DeJean and he wouldn't let it go. You had the George Pickens, like basically hog tying Reed Blankenship. And so it seemed like there were a ton of plays where after the play was done, you got a scrum and officials got to get in there and they didn't throw the flag, but a flag could have been thrown very easily. And he's like, it's the NFC East. How do you deal with that? And DQ gave this long, elaborate answer, and it was actually interesting. He talked about, because you rarely hear coaches go into specifics about topics like that, right? DQ was like basically we go over, and this is what I talk about being over prepared. We go over scenarios in which guys, you say, look, you're out there competing, shit happens, and you black out, and we've all been there, right? We've all been there where you get so mad, you snap, and like, don't ask me what happened after that, right? And you see it sometimes. And he's like, it's our job as teammates to get a guy out of there when he's seeing red, right? Just get him out of there and, save him from himself, essentially. And he said he and Frankie Louvu put on a little bit of a sort of an exercise to see how the team would react, where he and Frankie got into it. And he's like, Frankie's really giving it to him. And it's almost to the point where Frankie's going to kick his ass and nobody stepped in and did anything. And he's like, So you guys would just let Frankie kick my ass? Like, what are you guys doing? That's not how we conduct ourselves. We're teammates. You got to protect one another. So again, it was a great exercise. He talked about, making sure that you don't hurt the team. Like, it's a tough thing in the moment when you're in the heat of battle. Guy hits you in the face. It's so hard not to retaliate. You got all that testosterone, flowing, and you got all of that energy and emotion going. It's hard not to, that adrenaline's flowing. It's hard not to retaliate. But when you're able to keep your composure, instead of the official taking the cop out of, you get a personal foul, you get a personal foul. One team gets a personal foul and the other gets to get 15 yards. So that's something that he really harped on with the team. Thought that was a pretty interesting answer. He talked about Marshon Lattimore and his growth. And what I've seen from Marshon is he's really gotten comfortable. It clearly last year, the trade and everything was a lot for him to kind of take in. He was in a tough spot. They traded for him. He wasn't healthy. He felt like he needed to go light. It's very similar to Micah Parsons, right? Parsons was not healthy when he was traded to Green Bay, but he feels obligated to, make good on the trade for Green Bay and be out there on the field, even though he may be slightly compromised. That's kind of how Marshon Lattimore said he felt last year. We traded for him. He was injured. He was never fully healthy, but once he felt like he could go on the field, he went out there because I got to make good on this trade for them. I got to make sure that they feel like they got, what they traded for. And it just didn't work out last year, but now he's fully healthy. He's had a great offseason, and I see him smiling a ton. I see him, we joked, Rio and myself joked in particular about how this is a 9 to 5 guy. He's not there at 5:01. Once it's 5 o'clock, he's out, right? He looks like he's, one of the guys now. He looks like he's having a good time. He's smiling. He's hanging out with some of the other corners and some of the other guys on the team. And I think he is starting to fit in. And I think he's poised for a really big year. He's going to be the equivalent of what Darius Slay was for the Philadelphia Eagles. I truly believe that's what he's going to be for us. And I think we're gonna. I've said this already. You guys know where I stand on this secondary. I think they're gonna be the best secondary in the conference, and the fourth or so best in all of the National Football League. And then he talked about DQ did expectations and what the team this year can look forward to. And he said, "Look, the old expectations thing, I'll leave that to you guys. I don't really play that game. I live in the right now. I live in the moment and just take it one game at a time." But he said, "I can tell you this. We had a better camp this year in 2025 than we did in 2024. Just like he could probably say this and he won't say it because, he doesn't want to shit on the team from last year, and there's no reason to, but he'll tell you that on paper, we're more talented this year than we were last year. They've said numerous times that the depth is better, but they don't actually say talent-wise we're better, but we all know the truth. They're better. And so I think the expectation in his mind is we should be able to be better this year. But again, each year is its own entity, and you can't look at last year and just extrapolate what happened last year and say that it's going to happen this year. It's a brand new year, which is why I'm like, if you are who you say you are, which is what I talked about yesterday, prove it. Go out and start with a win over the New York Giants. And I've said this, if you have any aspirations, I said the same thing to the Chargers. You got any aspirations of winning the division, it starts now. This isn't what they did, which was slaying the dragon, which is the Chiefs. But I've said this, if you're going to win the division, you got to sweep the Giants. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Until the Giants prove that they're not the doormats of this division, everyone else is taking turns sweeping the Giants. We got to make sure we do our part as well. The Cowboys don't lose to the Giants, and the Eagles don't lose to the Giants. Well, then we shouldn't be losing to the Giants either. And so last year we swept them. This year we need to make plans to do the exact same thing if we have any aspirations of being NFC East champions. So, DQ said, look, we had a better camp. That's all I can tell you this year than we did last year. So that was DQ's presser. And before we move on and get to the game plan, let's get a word from one of our sponsors, Sleeper. Sleeper is the best way to experience and connect over sports together. It's a one-stop shop for all of your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat in the games in real time with other users, get the fastest scores, blazing fast news and alerts right at your fingertips, play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So enjoy sports the way they were meant to, together. Download the #1 sports app today. Predict the hottest football stats like passing yards, receiving yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and much more to cash in on your daily fantasy football skills. Use promo code LTN and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Sleeper. So let's get into the game plan and talk about what it's going to take to be victorious on Sunday against the New York Football Giants in Week 1 to kick this season off the right way. Excuse me. We're going to start with the offensive keys to the game because honestly, that is where our biggest advantage lies, is our offense against their defense, right? Like, I look at their defense as the strength of their team. I look at our offense as the strength of our team. I look at the fact that if we up front, and that's where we start with the offensive keys, win up front and protect 5. Okay. To me, that is the biggest offensive key outside of one more thing that we're going to talk about. And I'll, outline that when we get there. But to me, this is where the game is going to be won on Sunday, is whichever team dominates the line of scrimmage on both sides, offensively and defensively, I think is going to be the one to give themselves the best chance to win. Obviously, turnovers and things of that nature can alter a game and provide, a different outcome than what the statistics may indicate. But if we protect Jaden Daniels up front, like, I want to be able to run the football and be balanced and do all of those things. I'm not sure if the Giants' run defense is all that great, but if we can protect Jaden Daniels up front against that ferocious pass rush, they cannot, and I repeat, they cannot stop. And there aren't many teams in the league, for that matter, that can match up with Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, Deebo Samuel, and Zach Ertz. Do you understand how formidable of a foursome that is to put on the field and ask a team to be able to stop? This group is going to wreak havoc around the NFL offensively if they're healthy this season. And so the Giants can't cover those 3 receivers and Zach Ertz. Are you kidding me? And so that's where the advantage lies, is if we can protect Jaden Daniels and he's able to survey the field, and maybe protecting him also means just getting it out of his hands quickly. It means changing up the tempo, keeping the Giants off balance, quick passes so they don't get a chance to pin their ears back. It's going to be, imperative that you get off to some, fast starts in terms of first and second downs, where you're very effective on those downs to set up very manageable third down situations, or you just outright get the first down on first down or second down. Whatever the case may be, we win up front in this game and we protect Jaden Daniels. We protect 5. I just don't see how the Giants stop the trio of Terry, Noah, Deebo, and then you sprinkle in Zach Ertz. I just don't know how they stop that. So I feel really confident if we can win up front. Next offensive key, win third downs, and the red zone. And this is something that will be a theme throughout the year. You know how I am. I've got 3 big statistics, 4 if you add in fourth downs. But I've got 3 big statistics that I look at in every game, and I usually feel like these statistics usually tell you what the outcome of a game is going to be. Third down conversion rate, right? Turnover differential, turnover margin in the game, and red zone efficiency. Those 3 statistics usually tell the story in a football game. And here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 8 of 14 for the Commanders. That's 57%, right? We're capable. 8 of 14. Sustain offense, move the ball, put it in the red zone, put it in the end zone. I'm looking for 66% or better in the red zone in this game. That means anything above 2 of 3 is good for me. 3 of 4, 4 of 5, whatever that looks like, right? I don't want 50%, 1 of 2. I don't want 2 of 4. I don't want 3 of 6. None of that. Anything above 66%, sign me up. That means we're highly effective and highly efficient in the red zone, and that's going to lead to a victory for the good guys. Next offensive key, end drives with points. Obviously, preferably touchdowns. The last time we played the Giants in week 2, or the last time we played them at home early in the season, last year, we just kept scoring. The problem was they were all field goals, but it was enough to win. And I feel the same way in this game. I still don't think the Giants can score all that much. Like, Russell Wilson is there. Malik Neighbors is there. He was there last year. Like, they're not that much different offensively from the team we saw last year. Like, they haven't added a bunch of pieces to that offense. Like, they're basically the same group with just better quarterbacking in their minds. So, ultimately, can I be honest with you? Can I keep it a bean with you? I'm more afraid of Daniel Jones than I am Russell Wilson. Is that crazy? Am I crazy? Maybe I'm crazy for that statement. I'm so glad his ass is gone, because for whatever reason, he used to kick the dog shit out of us. And I can't explain it. I don't know why, but he always played his best football against us. And he was a threat to run. Russell Wilson ain't running no damn where. And if he does, he ain't going very far. So I'll take my chances with Russ. I know he's capable, but damn it, I was more afraid of Danny Dimes than I was Russell Wilson, Russell Wilson. So when I say end drive with points, look, just keep scoring, because I don't think these boys can get to 30. I don't think that's in their DNA. These boys, without help, without a special teams big play, without turnovers, setting the stage for them, these boys can't get to 30. They ain't built like that. So if you keep scoring, they can't keep up. They want no parts of a track meet. They want no parts of a shootout. They ain't got enough bullets. And they don't have the aim, right? Just keep scoring. Preferably touchdowns. Just keep scoring. And then the other really massive offensive key is limit miscues and mistakes. This is the only thing that I think can keep them in the game. Last year, it's literally what kept them in the game, right? The penalties in the red zone, stopping us from scoring touchdowns. When we lost games, these were the things that lost us the game. I don't feel like outside of Tampa in week 1 last year, when we lost games, it was usually because of mistakes we made, right? There were penalties. There were drop passes. The penalties killed us in the Bears game, almost cost us that game. The penalties killed us in the Giants game first time around, almost lost us that game. You had the drop passes against the Steelers, the turnovers against the Eagles in all of the Eagle games. The second one was an anomaly to have 5 turnovers and still win. You can't live that way and expect to win in this league. The Dallas game, we had the turnovers. We were awful in that department in that game. And the mistakes, the missed extra points, right? Um, you have to limit the miscues and mistakes. It's week one. Shit's going to happen, right? But you got to limit the penalties. You got to limit the drop passes. You got to limit the turnovers. And you got to limit the missed assignments. That's how the Giants stay in this game. They're not better than us. They're not more talented than us. They're not a better team. They don't have the better quarterback. You want them to stay in the game? This is what they're going to need. They're going to need us to be having self-inflicted wounds. They're going to need us to have a false start penalty. They're going to need us to have a holding penalty on 2nd and 1, making it 2nd and 11. They're going to need us to have a drop pass here or there. They're going to need us to have a turnover, right? Shorten the field for them. They're going to need us to miss an assignment, and all of a sudden, Jalen Hyatt is running wide open down the field. They're going to need us to make those type of mistakes in order for them to be successful. Don't do it. And you know what? Last year, to this team's credit, and again, this is not last year, but you're hoping to build off of last year. To our credit, when we played teams that were inferior to us, we dominated them. When we saw the Tennessees and the Carolinas and the Clevelands of the world, we took them out back. Pop, pop, put 2 in their dome and made it quick. When we didn't respect Arizona in their own house, we made it quick and painless. We started to do that last year with the Giants, the second game, 21-7 at half, and then for some reason we started playing with our food. Let's not play with our food this year. Let's limit the mistakes, the miscues, and force them to beat us on their own volition, which I don't think they're capable of doing. Defensive keys. Stop the run. I can't say that any more plain than that. You have to stop the run in this game. If they're able to remain balanced and not have to rely on Russell Wilson throwing the football 33 times, if he can throw the football 21 times, 23 times, and manage the shit out of the game, and everything that they want to do comes off of the run, i.e. boots. You're going to get a boot. I wouldn't be shocked if the first play of the game is a Russell Wilson boot action, tight end coming across the formation, and they dump it to him in the flats and try to pick up a nice gain, catch a snap, and looking for the run. Like, everything they do is going to be started with the run. You know they want to take a shot deep. Well, that's going to come off play action fake. You got to stop the run so that those run action fakes don't really move you. This is what you spent all of that money in the offseason on. This is what you invested in, to be able to stop the run and make teams like the Giants one-dimensional. Force Russell Wilson to have to beat you on third downs with his arm, which takes me to my second defensive key. Win the early downs to force third and longs. And when I say third and long, I'm talking 3rd and 6 or more. I don't want Russell Wilson living in a world where the Giants consistently in this game are in 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1. I don't want to see Russell Wilson being comfortable on checking it down on 3rd and 4 to his running back or to a tight end, or dumping it down to a receiver on a shallow cross on 3rd and 3 and getting a first down. I don't want to see him set and throw a quick out on 3rd and 3 for 4 yards and move the sticks. I don't want him to be afforded those opportunities. I want him to have to survey the field, stand back there on 3rd and 7 and try to make something happen. I'll take my chances with our secondary against their receivers, our line, defensive line against their offensive line, especially if Andrew Thomas isn't out there. Whether he's out there or not, I don't give a shit. I'll take my chances. But what I don't want to see them in is consistently finding themselves in very manageable third down situations that they can convert. In my mind, I want 3 of 12 on third down. I want to suffocate these boys on third downs. Really, really make it uncomfortable for them on third downs. Well, it starts by doing your work early. First and second downs, setting the tone for a third and long where we can get the hell off the field. Next defensive key, slow down Malik Neighbors. Look, this is a tall order. This is a tough task, okay? I got in my notes, I want him to have less than 85 yards and no touchdowns. He's allowed one touchdown only if he has less than 85 yards. If he has 114 yards, he can't have a score because he could light us up and still not impact the game from a score perspective. But I really don't want him to have either, right? I don't want him to have any touchdowns. I don't want him to have over 85 yards. He's so dynamic. He's so good. Again, this is why you've revamped the secondary. This is why you got them corners. Let's see what they're about. And then lastly, this is a big one. Sack Russell Wilson at least 3 times and force at least 1 turnover. I think we're capable. Ball is life. We'll find out if the ball is really life or not this season. I'm still not convinced. But I do think we can get Russ for 1. And I really want to sack him 4 times. That's the number for me. But I'll take 3. I'll take 3. I'll settle for 3. But 4 or more is the number for me. I really think we can get to him. And at this point of his career, Russell Wilson didn't run away from anybody. He does not want to turn the ball over. He's willing to eat the football and take a sack in order to not put it in harm's way. He's one of those guys that, will crumble under pressure and take a sack. He's also very slippery. So we got to be mindful of our rush lanes. We just watched 2 games transpire on Thursday and Friday where quarterbacks were not contained well. Mahomes ran really well. Herbert broke the Chiefs' back on the final, third down of the game. The Cowboys had no answers for Jalen Hurts. He did the same thing Herbert did in a critical third down situation to ice the game. And so we know what our quarterback is capable of with his legs. But Russell Wilson can't be allowed to do that. Close him in. Don't let him escape. Get him on the ground. And if a turnover opportunity presents itself, we got to have it. Which takes me to my final outcome. I think this is a much closer game than I would like it to be, a much closer game than you think it's probably going to be. For the lot of you that I've talked to who think this is going to be a cakewalk, we're going to blow these boys out, they're not on our level, bless your heart. And I hope you're right. I don't see it. This is NFC East football. I don't give a shit how bad the Giants are. We always play each other tough. Even when we sucked, we played the Giants relatively tough. It's just what happens when these 2 teams square off. And I don't see this game being any different. Don't let the 31-19 final score fool you. This is a 24-19 game with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and Jaden Daniels gets the football. All right. This is a 5-point game with the Giants, in the ball game midway through the fourth when Jaden Daniels in the offense gets the football and proceeds to march down the field on a 5-minute drive that's capped off by a Jaden Daniels touchdown pass to Zach Ertz to put this thing to bed 31-19. Okay? The Giants were in this game every step of the way. Every step of the way. But we put them away late. That's what I see happening. I don't see us blowing them out. I don't see us running away with this thing, making it a no contest. I see us having to play a hard-fought game, but prevailing late. What says you? Leave it down in the comment section of this video. Would love to hear what you think. Score and more. What do you think is going to happen? How will it happen? Who will do what? Leave it all in the comment section. Can't wait to read your responses. We're finally here. Bart Scott. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. Week 1. Man, feels like it's been a really quick off season, and then it felt like the preseason was just long as hell. The wait is finally over. It's time for the 2025 Commanders to announce their arrival, and I would love for them to do it in style and blow these boys out, but I just want to win. You know what it is. I just want the dub. Don't care what it looks like. Just get it. We can sort through the mess of it later. Just get the dub. I will say we owe these boys a 40 burger. We do owe them one, but I don't think this is the time we get it. Anyway, I digress. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will definitely see you tomorrow. Until then, I'm your man Louie T signing off. Take care.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hold. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone.